Good afternoon. I'm Sal Greco, and you're watching and listening to The Sal Greco Show. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification button. If you're watching us on Rumble, hit the Rumble button, hit the like button, hit the follow button. And if you're listening on any major podcast streaming platforms, please like, share, and subscribe. Today, we're going to have a guest on, but I'm going to show you some of the topics we're going to cover here. New York City Mayor Eric Dym not only violated federal laws, but state laws, taking $10 million in taxpayer money via foreign assets. It's a lot more serious than just airline ticket upgrades. What about potential charges from ongoing investigations? And then we have a large quantity of phone and text communications prosecutors obtained prior to the December indictment of Lewis-Martin and her accused co-conspirators relates to ongoing investigations that have yet to result in charges, prosecutors revealed Tuesday. So we're going to be discussing Eric Dym, the indictment, what could be happening, what may be happening. We're also going to discuss the 50A yet again, which is what is trying to hold the police department accountable in New York City. That and much more coming up on the Sal Greco Show. Well, as promised, I have a lot of news to break down with our good friend here. He's the co-host of the finest Unfiltered podcast, now retired NYPD Lieutenant Eric Dym. Well, Eric, welcome back. How you been? How's everything going for you?
It's great. I mean, always a pleasure being with Sal on the Sal Greco Show and, of course, on the finest Unfiltered channel. Sal wanted me to wear my hat again. Said it was a cool look. I couldn't find it. I searched it all around. I have no idea what it is. And you know how things are. After the show, I know I'm going to find the hat. So...
Yeah. There was like almost a request from the fans that they said, we love that hat that Eric was wearing. So I'm just saying, you might have to wear that hat at all times.
I got some good feedback, and some people broke my chops. Comes to the territory, right?
Yeah. So today we're going to bring some news, and I'm thinking we'll start at our favorite, target. And that's New York City Mayor Eric Dym. And why? Because he's in charge of the city. He's in charge of the New York City Police Department. And we have a slew of things that are going on around him. And also the things that he does have affected the New York City Police Department, which affect people that come to us, also people we know. And we still have an affinity for the place we used to work for because we're watching the entire system. Everything that we knew has been flushed down the toilet here. So I wanted to start with one article, and then I want to jump to another article. But before that, I was going to show you one post, and it's actually by Roger Stone. This comes from Roger Stone, my good buddy. The Trump Justice Department dropping the pending and serious federal charges against New York City Mayor Eric Dym would be politically costly for the president, but end up having no effect given that Adams' indictment on state charges is imminent. Do you agree or you don't agree there, Eric?
Oh, outstanding. I mean, listen, this comes from the horse's mouth. And I think it's great that actually Roger Stone comments on it, right? Because Roger Stone got a pardon. So who could speak on it better? Roger Stone himself. And I can tell you right now, he's absolutely right. If these charges get dropped, it doesn't matter. He's still facing potential charges from the state. So at this point, I think that the curtain hasn't been unveiled. I think there's still a lot of superseding indictments that would probably come out. This could be some type of ploy also to drop the charges from the federal court to put Dym on the state level, maybe with some other charges. It may be a tactic. It may be a ploy. But one thing we know, it's a shining star to say that Eric Dym should not be getting a pardon. I mean, especially a preemptive pardon. And I think that would be a major mistake because at this point, there's so much unscrupulous behavior behind closed doors, we have no idea what's really going on with Eric Adams. I think to me, it's sort of like, just like a little taste, right? They gave the first indictment for Eric Adams when it came to this potential bribery case with Turkish, these Turkish elites. And to me, it's just an indication. Like, here's a little teaser, just to see, the snakes that start to rattle, right? Because snakes only rattle to commit suicide. But at this point, Eric Adams, he's got a lot more to face. But I tell you what, he's a hell of a survivor. I don't think anybody else could survive this long as mayor of New York City. But I think he's put on a complete show. He gives a face that everything's okay. He's still laughing and smiling. But to me, I think it's starting to come off artificial. And I think behind that, I think he's starting to get mixed emotions. And I think the walls are crumbling down.
I can't believe he made it to the end of the year where he made the finest Unfiltered man in the year, actually. I think that was a bet between you and John. I had a bet that he would make it. Who makes it to the end of the year? I think John said he wouldn't. You said he did. Therefore, if he did, you were going to give him the man of the year, and he got man of the year somehow. So going off what you just said, I have one article, and then I'll get your take on it. It came from the city, and it's in regards to the state's prosecution against his former chief advisor, Ingrid Lewis-Martin. So this was from the city NYC, and it's from the Dean of Journalism in New York City, Greg Smith. So this is how it starts. Prosecutors point to wider probe in bribery case against top Adams aide. Reams of evidence provided to lawyers for Ingrid Lewis-Martin and her son revealed the existence of an ongoing probe that goes beyond pending charges. A court hearing Tuesday made clear that the Manhattan District Attorney's investigation of Mayor Eric Adams' former aide, Ingrid Lewis-Martin, encompasses far more than the bribery and money laundering charges she's facing. A large quantity of phone and text communications prosecutors obtained prior to the December indictment of Lewis-Martin and her accused co-conspirators relates to ongoing investigations that have yet to result in charges, prosecutors revealed Tuesday. Lewis-Martin, a longtime associate of Adams and his chief advisor, resigned in December, 4 days before her indictment was unsealed by Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg. Prosecutors charged Lewis-Martin with arranging $100,000 in payments for her son, Glenn Martin II, from two billers in exchange for pressuring city buildings inspectors to back off objections to their developments. All four pled not guilty and denied wrongdoing. Lewis-Martin's association with Adams goes back more than a decade to his time in the state Senate, continuing through his tenure as Brooklyn Borough President and culminating with her appointment to the number 2 spot at City Hall. It's widely known that Lewis-Martin has long been Adams' closest advisor and confidant. Adams faces his own troubles with a pending federal indictment on bribery and campaign finance charges. President Trump has criticized the prosecution of Adams and implied because the case is federal, unlike Lewis-Martin's, he could pardon him. Adams has pled not guilty and denied wrongdoing. In September, Lewis-Martin received a subpoena from Manhattan federal prosecutors, and her phones were seized by the DA when she arrived at JFK International Airport, returning from a Japan vacation with Jesse Hamilton, an Adams associate. The mayor tasked him with handling city leases, and Diana Boutros, a broker for Cushman and Wakefield, who works with the city on those real estate deals. Hamilton and Boutros' phones were also confiscated by the DA. Lewis-Martin also surfaced in the DA's 2023 indictment of Adams' former building commissioner Eric Ulrich, although she was not charged. Prosecutors highlighted her interactions with a Brooklyn tow truck company or Brooklyn tow truck firm owner, prosecutors say, was bribing Ulrich for assistance in obtaining favorable treatment from City Hall. Ulrich and his co-defendants all pled not guilty, and their cases are pending. The existence of an ongoing, broader investigation emerged during a virtual court hearing before Manhattan Supreme Court Justice Daniel Convisor, when defense attorneys complained that the DA, as required, turned over reams of evidence, including phone conversations and texts. In this case, that included material that went well beyond the charges in the December indictment. The DA imposed a restriction barring them from showing this material, even discussing it with their clients, a limitation defense attorneys contested Tuesday. Assistant District Attorney Guy Tardanico argued that Lewis-Martin, Glenn Martin II, and two contractors should not be allowed to see the material about ongoing investigations because the information could wind up being shared with others under investigation. They're proposing that we disclose material related to targets of pending investigation, he said, noting that the material prosecutors have turned over is very specific to ongoing matters, specific to ongoing investigations. Prosecutors often impose attorneys' eyes only restrictions on evidence they turn over to defense attorneys in criminal cases over concerns that the clients could use the material to either warn associates under investigation or to target informants. Kathleen Cassidy, attorney for one of the indicted builders, Raizada Vayed, said that concern could easily be addressed if they all agree that their clients would be explicitly prohibited from sharing the information with anyone, preventing them from telling other targets of the investigation. And Michael Chabella, attorney for Martin, also known by his DJ name Suave Luciano, argued that letting the lawyers at least discuss the other material with their clients allows us to speak with our clients about the breadth of the investigation. Lewis-Martin's attorney, Arthur Aidala, who has in the past represented accused members of organized crime, acknowledged that the prosecutors can have a legitimate reason for keeping certain information, such as the identities of cooperating witnesses from criminal defendants. In this case, however, he considered such fears to be unreasonable. Yeah, we have organized crime cases where someone's going to get their head blown off, he said, but I'm very confident that's not the position here. Judge Conviser ordered the DA to spell out in writing by next week specifically what material should remain attorneys' eyes only and what material the lawyers could discuss with their client. Eric, that was a long read, but I think there's a lot of information there. What is your take reading all of that or hearing that?
So if you look at the career of Eric Adams and his relationship with Ingrid Lewis-Martin, Ingrid Lewis-Martin is the confidant, and it's believed she's the brains behind the operation. She's been with Eric Adams for the majority, and if not, maybe the entirety of his political career. So I would say it's almost like the analogy I always say when it comes to these two. It's a chessboard, right? And she's the queen on the chessboard, and she can move all different directions because she's the brain of the operation. But now that she's out of the equation, the king, who's Eric Adams, doesn't have the protection anymore. So now it's checkmate for Eric Adams. That's why Eric Adams at this point looks so desperate trying to get a pardon. He moves left, there's more indictments coming. He moves right, he's not getting that pardon. He moves forward, he's lost the trust in New York City. His polls are substantially, at this point, completely antagonizing towards him. I think it's 86% unfavorable towards Eric Adams. Also, the first indicted mayor of New York City. He wanted to be the first of many. So he's the first to have the worst numbers. He's the first worst mayor of New York City. He's the first mayor to be indicted. So Ingrid Lewis-Martin, she holds the cards to this entire operation. She's the confidant, and it's every reason to believe she's the brains of the operation. Now, as far as sealed documents not providing information, that holds a lot of questions. And everyone should be alarmed by that because Arthur Aidala is accurate in that assessment that, yes, it's necessary to protect potential witnesses from mob-type mentality, right? Organized crime. And Eric Adams, to our knowledge, is not part of organized crime, but he is part of a criminal enterprise, and that's his cohorts, and that's his administration that he's appointed. Timothy Pearson, Philip Banks, all these nefarious characters have every reason to believe have some type of mob mentality. I mean, they all claim to be thugs from the street, and they're acting like thugs when they're in the administration of New York City. So, to me, it's definitely a red flag. It's indicative. We don't know what's behind those sealed documents, but to our knowledge and our experience, and Sal, you know it, usually that's protecting witnesses. So why would this case be any different? So to me, that's another red flag why Eric Adams should definitely not get a pardon, and especially a preemptive pardon in his case. He's an epic fail, ineffective. If we put aside all this corruption, he's still ineffective in that mayor. This is just a cherry on top. But there should be no threshold for corruption in New York City, especially New York City. The eyes of the entire country focus on New York City politics and New York City news.
Well, Eric, I also want to point something else out because, what it is attesting to here is that it's saying they're afraid that they're going to go find, the other witnesses or whatever. They're going to try to disrupt the investigations. Now, we do know one thing. This DJ Suave, which is Ingrid Lewis' son, Ingrid Lewis herself, Eric Adams herself, were frequenting and partying at our favorite nightclub in the Bronx that's now shuttered, Consa Frito, which was owned by the then police commissioner Ed Caban's brother Richard, but managed, we think really owned, by a self-admitted criminal mob associate, Jimmy Rodriguez. Now, what did Jimmy Rodriguez do, Eric? Did he not threaten John Macari online? And there was no reason for that. Am I right or am I wrong, Eric?
Sure, right? The NYPD, New York City politics should not have any association with someone who has a criminal past, someone the reason to believe that they could commit a crime, especially a felon as Jimmy Rodriguez, which is reflective of the hypocrisy of the wrongful termination of you yourself, Sal Greco. You were wrongfully terminated, a complete political target. It's absolutely ridiculous that you were terminated from the police department with a 14-year career, unblemished, out there making numerous arrests. And you know what? They utilized and weaponized the charge of criminal association. So John and I both said it. Criminal association, that charge and that policy of the New York City Police Department is trash. They should throw it out of the patrol guide. It should no longer exist. Because Eric Dym, his entire administration, the fraternal organizations of the NYPD, the upper echelon of the NYPD, high prolific politicians in New York City, all are hanging around at Consa Fritos and other various locations in the Bronx where Jimmy Rodriguez has an association. So that charge needs to go out the window. For those reasons alone, you should be vindicated, reinstated, and compensated, and there should be a public apology. I'm telling you right now, there has to be a public apology to Sal Greco because you were wrongfully terminated. But yet, you know what's interesting about that, Sal? Now that Eric Dym is Blue MAGA, and I call him Blue MAGA. Pre-MAGA Eric, but I call him Blue MAGA. He's still blue. If you were employed by the NYPD right now, you would be his best friend. Your ties to Roger Stone, which ultimately ties to Donald Trump, you would be Eric Dym's best friend at this point. But that's who Eric Dym is. We have no idea what he's for or what he's against. But one thing we know who he's for Eric. Eric is for Eric.
I would say that many people do agree with you. But in furtherance of the point I was actually making here, since we know that there was this episode where they did send a mob associate to threaten you and John Macari, and we know that they used other people in the New York City Police Department to do the very same thing that Jimmy Rodriguez did, and also people that were active. There is a history here of people in the Eric Dym administration and his inner circle that would send people to threaten people that they deem are a threat to them via, like you, via your podcast, via what you say on social media. Therefore, the prosecutors here have absolutely a legitimate excuse to say, you cannot see this because your prior history with the cronies around you are to go and threaten people that pose a threat to you by having a podcast or postings on social media. So what would you do to someone who's a witness, a potential witness against you in a criminal case? What do you think about that, Eric?
Well, let me get into that. I'm glad that you asked about that, right? So, there's a lot of information going on. So many layers to peel back. But John Macari, my co-host and partner on New York's Finest Unfiltered podcast, had no knowledge and no association with Jimmy Rodriguez. We spoke about Jimmy Rodriguez when we did a roundtable discussion with you yourself, Sal Greco, on the show. We talked about the hypocrisy at Consa Fritos, the nefarious characters that are there, the NYPD fraternal organizations having Christmas parties, all kinds of functions. Everyone's hanging around at Consa Fritos where Jimmy Rodriguez has a record himself. And we've even played a video reflective of a mobster that talks about his relationship with Jimmy Rodriguez. Is this someone that the NYPD should be hanging around? Absolutely not. And that's something we just spoke about. And sure enough, shortly thereafter, John is contacted by Jimmy Rodriguez on social media and starting to be inquisitive and basically threatening him, right? Underlining threats. And we knew right away. So where did this come from? At the time, former police commissioner Ed Caban was the commissioner. He's in charge. Every reason to believe that it was from Ed Caban and also Jimmy Rodriguez to attack John Macari. And for me, I said at this point, it's interesting, right? He just came after John. He didn't come after me. And he didn't come after you, Sal. And I said, you know what? I think the reason why they're coming after John is because, one, they wanted this podcast shut down, right? But I think ultimately they wanted to come after John also because John was extremely vocal about the vaccine mandate. And they knew at some point he would have an attorney on his side and have legitimize a lawsuit and have a lot of people behind him. There's a lot of organizations that are behind John when it comes to that. So to me, that was another way not only to suppress the podcast, but really to suppress John with this potential lawsuit. So I think it was kind of like a 2-for-1 deal. There's no doubt in my mind, right? It's apparent, and based on the evidence and based on my observations, that came from the police department. It came from the upper echelon of the police department. And in retrospect, there's no reason to trust the upper echelon, because John and I were both threatened. Our kids were threatened by a fake moniker known as All Cops Are Woke, which a member of the service is behind that. At the same time, simultaneously getting attacks by Jimmy Rodriguez. We made a complaint to Internal Affairs Bureau, and that case went nowhere. It wasn't even classified as a corruption criminal case. It was classified as misconduct. So we've been stonewalled, and our threats were not taken legitimate, and that was under Internal Affairs, and it continues under Jessica Tisch, the new police commissioner.
And that is why I state the prosecution's case, why there shouldn't be any information exchange. You give them what you need, because there is a history that these people, if they do find out anything and have a way to try to get to someone, here it would be someone who's a direct witness against Ingrid Lewis-Martin or her son or anyone else that could be a co-defendant there, because it's ongoing. They would try to threaten them, and the history would be they used Jimmy Rodriguez, they used the police department. So why wouldn't they they have access to the police department. They have actual police law enforcement databases. They could go ahead and trace who the defendants are, and they could do all kinds of criminal stuff. What's to stop them? So the prosecutors in this instance are correct. I always say, a lot of people don't like Alvin Bragg. I'm not a fan of his either, but you know what? A broken clock is correct twice a day. So why wouldn't he be correct here in how he's going about prosecuting not only Ingrid Lewis-Martin, but any other potential big person behind that's going to be a co-defendant? At least that's my take. But speaking of this, I would like to show you another article, and it was written by Nick Ackerman, who used to be a prosecutor for the Southern District of New York, and it was written in the Daily News. So it says, Manhattan DA Alvin Bragg must indict Eric Adams. As an alum of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York, I am deeply troubled by reports that President Trump's Justice Department may order the acting U.S. Attorney to drop the pending charges against Mayor Adams. Politics has never played a role in the office's investigations or prosecutions. For example, most recently, the office prosecuted Democratic Senator Bob Menendez for bribery and Republican Representative Chris Collins for insider trading. There is one surefire way to stop Trump from derailing the Adams prosecution and protect the U.S. Attorney's Office and the citizens of New York City. This is for Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg to indict Adams for state charges based on the same facts underlying the federal prosecution. Trump cannot pardon state crimes or control the local DA. A state indictment would fully negate the utility of Trump's DOJ dismissing Adams' indictment or Trump pardoning Adams. Since Watergate and up until Trump, DOJ has acted without presidential political interference. Unfortunately, DOJ is now an integral cog in Trump's political machine. Trump has already instructed his DOJ to drop the criminal prosecution of former Nebraska Republican Representative Jeff Fortenberry, who was awaiting trial in Washington on charges of lying to the FBI, along with pardoning some 1,500 January 6 convicts. Trump's DOJ moved to dismiss all pending January 6 prosecutions in the District of Columbia. DOJ cannot justify dismissing the Adams indictment based on the import of its serious allegations of fraud, bribery, and campaign violations. The charges span more than 10 years, starting when Adams was Brooklyn Borough president and through his tenure as mayor. This is not, as Adams has claimed, and as the allegations reflect, a political witch hunt. The indictment alleges that Adams used illegal foreign and corporate donors disguised as legitimate voters to defraud New York City of $10 million in matching campaign funds. The indictment also alleges that Adams received bribes in the form of free trips to Turkey in return for assisting the Turkish government in municipal issues. Adams is further alleged to have engaged in a cover-up by concocting a false story and refusing to provide to authorities the password to his cell phone. The case against Adams also appears to be supported by overwhelming evidence. The indictment references individuals who are likely trial witnesses in numerous emails and text messages, all of which will form the government's trial evidence. The press has also reported Adams staffers who have been the targets of federal search warrants. His former liaison to the Turkish community, Rana Abasova, is reported to be cooperating with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The strength of the Adams case is also affirmed by the New York City Campaign Finance Board. In December, the board denied Adams' request for millions of dollars in public matching funds for his re-election campaign, citing his track record of alleged fraud and his refusal to comply with the board's inquiries. The national importance of this prosecution cannot be overemphasized. Adams' indictment must be viewed in the context of foreign countries trying to influence U.S. politics. For example, the Adams indictment alleges that one Turkish donor believed he was investing in a future U.S. president. Adams is not the only politician who has been charged with accepting bribes from a foreign country. Menendez was just sentenced to 11 years for accepting gold bars and cash from Egypt. In May last year, Texas Congressman Henry Cuellar was indicted for accepting $600,000 in bribes for agreeing to influence U.S. foreign policy in favor of the government of Azerbaijan. It is not unusual for the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Manhattan DA's office to cooperate and indict on the same matter. Indeed, during the Bill de Blasio mayoral administration, Adams' predecessor, both offices jointly investigated possible corruption. Here, the investigation that resulted in this indictment was a joint effort between the U.S. Attorney's Office and the New York City Department of Investigation. DOI Commissioner Jocelyn Schrauber, an Adams appointee and a former assistant U.S. attorney in New York, appeared alongside U.S. Attorney Damian Williams when he publicly announced the Adams charges. He should not overlook the power of the Manhattan District Attorney as a weapon against Trump's corrupt goal of freeing Adams from facing justice. Trump's ability to dismiss or pardon Adams' federal crimes would become an exercise in futility as the result of an indictment against Adams from the Manhattan DA for New York State crimes. And of course, Ackerman was formerly an assistant special Watergate prosecutor and an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. I'm just going to say this. I don't agree with every little thing that was written there because there's a lot of conjecture, political. I could tell Ackerman is not a fan of President Trump, and he does mention pardoning the January 6th. I call them, hostages, so I agreed with doing that. I don't know why he's against that. But in this instance, the crimes, I believe, are egregious, so he is correct. So what do you think about that article and what Nick Ackerman was saying?
Well, I think the article, to me, was a little biased, right? A little biased towards the Trump administration. He's trying to make a comparison between the parallel from the office of DA Bragg and also what's going on in the Trump administration, talk about Trump's Department of Justice. He tried to make the parallel and actually, the standard and the dichotomy between January 6th and what's going on with Eric Adams. So what's interesting about that is in the article, it says that, Alvin Bragg indicates that there's no political views in the justice system in the Manhattan DA's office. And we could just debunk that right now. And I can tell you straight out which case was completely political and debunks that right now is the Daniel Penny case. The Daniel Penny case was nothing but a political target. That was a complete political witch hunt. That was a case that should have never made it to a courtroom anywhere in this entire country. But in New York City, Daniel Penny, which we now is now the Daniel Penny effect, has caused alarm to anyone that has the potential to be a good Samaritan, especially in the subways right now that they're out of control. The NYPD is touting a 36% decrease in crime in the subways in January 2025 compared to January 2024. Yet we look around and the crime that's going on appears to be horrendous. So I have questions about how they're reporting crimes in the subways. Also, their crime fighting strategy plan does not seem to be sustainable. Now, when we go further into this article, I think it's quite interesting. We talk about Eric Adams in this case, in this Turkish bribery case. This Turkish bribery case is a big deal, but it's just one element. It's in one aspect. But everything with Eric Adams has to do with the dollar, has to do with green, right? We talk about the New York City campaign funds. It's quite interesting. He cannot be trusted when it comes to matching funds. And it's also been unscrupulous behavior that's been under suspicion his entire political career. His entire political career, he has been under suspicion. So this is nothing new. The only difference now, for some reason, the justice system has been ready to actually move forward with charges. And to me, that only because there's a potential RICO case going on with Eric Adams and also his constituents, along with this egregious amount of nepotism in this administration. So I think at this point, that's why. So if the charges do get dropped federally, headed for a state case, that's really going to be the litmus test. And if Alvin Bragg has an opportunity to bring this to his office, that really is the litmus test for Alvin Bragg, even further than the Trump case. But to say that his office does not have any, has not been sidelined by any politics, that is a complete lie. And we see the different standards in that office. If someone's arrested for a violent crime, the criminal society pandering that we see in comparison, we've had police officers that actually had small accusations of theft. Shouldn't be any stealing, but the standard that was applied to these police officers was egregious, and the crime should fit the punishment. The punishment should fit the crime. I'm not excusing police officers that are bad apples and bad actors, but we cannot also allow the hammer just to be completely on people when it's so egregious, and yet when we have people out there in society committing so much crime and the same actions and the same leverage of the justice system in Alvin Bragg's office is not applied. To me, that's another paradox.
Yeah, I got what you're saying. I understand it. I think that, of course, Alvin Bragg, to say that his office has not been politicized, it clearly was. It's been weaponized for numerous cases. So to say that it's not political, the stuff that Alvin Bragg does, that would be a lie. In this instance, though, whether you want to go with the Eric Adams defense, which is asinine, it's a political witch hunt, or not, okay? The point here is, was a crime committed here? The answer is going to be yes. And it is egregious because it's over a 10-year span. So all you have is someone that was ensnared, whether he be in a political office or a regular civilian. In this instance, he holds a high office, and it's so bad that the fact here is the New York Campaign Finance Board stopped their audit of this campaign, the 2021 campaign, and demanded $10.1 million be repaid back to the taxpayers from Eric Adams. It doesn't get more serious than that. If you look at it from all angles, whether you like Eric Adams, you don't, whether you think it's political, whether you think it's a witch hunt, whether you think it's a serious case, all signs lead to the fact showing Eric Adams took $10 million. He abused his office. He was selling out whatever he can to get to where he's at. And now the chickens have come home to roost. That's all this is. And we've seen it with other cases. So I think in this one instance here, although Nick Ackerman is completely biased and he doesn't like Trump, and it seems like he doesn't like conservatives, he's not in agreement with the partners January 6th. And listen, everyone's entitled to their own opinion, such as you, Eric, or myself. But for me personally, he does lay out facts in the Eric Adams case that would lead you to believe Alvin Bragg does have a case to bring an indictment, and he should do it just so that we don't have like a Steve Bannon situation where Bannon was pardoned at the last minute in his Build the Wall scam case. You know, that's Eric Adams' ally, Steve Bannon. Just make that clear. And Steve Bannon's case was federal, and everybody was found guilty, but Steve Bannon was a coward and never faced that trial because he was angling for his pardon while that trial was going on. And then he got state charges brought. And I don't want to hear anything about Steve Bannon and his, he was politically persecuted in Washington, D.C. That case has nothing to do with this case. And everyone eventually, one way or the other, needs to meet the piper. So in this case, Bannon, who was pardoned, now faces state charges because he never even faced a criminal trial. So the same thing could be said for Eric Adams if they are to step in right now. If Trump was to pardon him, I don't believe that's going on. I actually think that there's some kind of plea agreement happening behind the scenes because Eric's been dodging the press. He seems that he's flustered. He's got a lot going on. I mean, that's my take. I don't know what you think, Eric.
Sal, I think you make some great, valid points. I do think that's why I say this could be the ultimate litmus test. At this point, I think Eric Adams is like in political purgatory, right? Because he's ousted by the Democrats, not because he claims the Democrats ousted him. He ousted the Democrats because no longer is he pre-indictment Eric. He's blue MAGA. So he put himself in political purgatory. So it would make sense for Alvin Bragg to actually go forward with an indictment because he's on the outs with the Democrats right now. So, I mean, that office is completely politicized, but there's no doubt in my mind that Eric Adams is completely guilty of these charges. You know, I saw the indictment. These allegations are pretty strong for allegations. I mean, if this was just in a civil trial, you would say, based on the indictment, that the preponderance of evidence was met just on that alone. And what's the preponderance of evidence? 51% chance you did it, 49% chance you did it. So just looking at that alone, to me, this is like the OJ case. Like, everybody knows he did it, but everyone's afraid to say he did. But he did, right? So there's no doubt about it. I do believe that there will be superseding indictments. There's no doubt about it. I don't think he should get some type of pardon. I think that he should face the charges. And if Eric Adams is accurate in what he says, that, hey, he tells people to follow law because he follows the law, then he should want this to play out in court and say, hey, I want my day in court and I want to show the world that I'm innocent. But that's not what he's saying. All the actions and behavior that he's actually, that he's presented these past few months, to me, is indicative of guilt. That's a sign of guilt. He's not saying, hey, I'm innocent and I didn't do anything wrong. He's trying to get himself a pardon. Hence his flight to Mar-a-Lago. Hence going to the inauguration. Eric Adams, let me tell you, he's a hell of a character. He will do anything for Eric. But no surprise in this administration. No surprise with Eric Adams. His entire career was under suspicion. Why would it be any different? Now he's got more power and more influence as the mayor of New York City. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. And this was just as expected.
He also went to the National Prayer event in D.C. on Thursday morning. It looks really bad. I mean, at this point, you look desperate, and there is no political capital in Eric Adams left. So other than groveling and looking very weak, which he is, I think it's pathetic. But you did mention something. Eric Adams keeps saying you need to follow the law. So I'm going to show you a post because we segue into the next thing, because next week, Eric Adams is expected to go to Congress to testify about the entire sanctuary city laws and statuses of not only New York City, but also the Chicago mayor, Mayor Johnson, who's being sued by the DOJ right now about the sanctuary city status and how they don't cooperate. ICE should be having cooperation from the local police departments, but they never do. We don't, and it's because, there's all kinds of restrictions there. So I want to show you this post. John McCarry posts this. He says, watch how quick New York City mayor no longer, quote, follows the law, end quote. And it's from the New York Post, and it says Attorney General Pam Bondi orders the DOJ to pause all federal funding for sanctuary cities. Now, Eric, this has been a hot topic. It's been in the forefront. I was one on the job. I used to actually arrest many illegal immigrants that were driving, DWI. I myself would say, why are we even prosecuting these people? They actually should be turned over to ICE. I think you should wash your hands because that's a crime. Even if they stand in court, what happens is they let them right out. There's some of these guys that would lock up would have ICE detainer warrants and it would never honored. And that is one of the issues here. So with that being said now, Eric, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's no doubt in my mind. I actually put a post out. Shout out to John McCarry for awesome post on that. I seen that post, of course, my co-host and partner. I had said stop the green, and we get to see what lies in between. And basically what that means is once we stop the funding, then we'll really see the true Eric Adams, even as he's blue MAGA, how the sanctuary city plays out. And we're seeing it right now. We're seeing it not through Eric Adams. We're seeing it through Jessica Tisch, the new police commissioner of the NYPD, because she has now put the NYPD at odds with ICE. And it's absolutely ridiculous for her memorandum to come out to the police department, Operations Order 4, if anyone has an opportunity to see it. And Operations Number 4 actually lays out that being an illegal immigrant in this country is not a crime. Trespassing into this country is not a crime. And in fact, we do know that's a crime. She says it's civil in nature. And that goes even further to say that the NYPD will not work with what they call their federal partners. How are you partners if you're not working together? They're not going to work with ICE. If ICE is involved in something, they will treat them as if anyone else, if they need help and their public safety is at risk, then the NYPD would step in. But other than that, they put the NYPD at odds with them. And that's absolutely ridiculous right now. It's reckless and irresponsible when we have the stem and the spread of Tren de Aragua, not just in New York City, throughout this entire country, which is a gang that stems from 8 several countries in South America. It's a gang that's spread throughout the entire country. And that gang has $15 million. And since my last research on it, I'm sure they probably have more money now. And that's a major problem in New York City. And those illegal military age males need to be apprehended by the NYPD, and there needs to be correlation, and they need to work with ICE. And the NYPD being at odds with ICE does not help anybody. Should NYPD walk into the streets and just pick people off the street and ask people about their immigration status? Absolutely not. And that's not what we're saying to do, right? I think that, we don't have a problem. If there are illegal people in this country and they're here for a better life, we're okay with that. We understand it. But there's people that cross this border because they have nefarious intentions, and they come from the spoils of South America, and they're not the people that we want in this country, and they're here to cause public safety and alarm, and they're raping and pillaging people in these streets, and they've committed some of the most heinous crimes. Those people need to be deported to maintain public safety in this country. And for the NYPD to be at odds with ICE, that's the responsibility of Eric Adams, because Eric Adams, in no doubt in my mind, is the real police commissioner for the NYPD.
Yeah, he could easily write the executive order that says you have to honor ICE detainer warrants. I know there's a legislation, but you know what? When you have the guts to write an executive order, which is what President Trump has been doing since he got into office. Now, if you want to challenge this, it would go to court, and then you let a judge decide whether that executive order, that legislation, what exactly is the body of this, and what are the terms of the legislation? Because these are things that Eric Adams never challenged, never tried to challenge, which he should have. The thing about the right to shelter does not mention anything about sheltering illegal immigrants. It says you have to shelter documented citizens. So that was another scam that Eric Adams didn't even try. No one's ever challenged that ruling from 40 or 50 years ago. It's so simple, but he doesn't have the guts to do it because he's feckless. He is the guy that just likes to roam around, hang out at the nightclubs. He's selling out the office, and he goes back home, wherever that is, New Jersey, New York, who knows at this point. But that's the case in this whole sanctuary city thing, where the police department, at the very least, should be cooperating with, there's raids to be conducted, or we're holding one of yours, and we notify you. Oh, you're right. I don't agree with I lock someone up and I'm calling ICE. But I did want to call ICE for the detainer warrants. Obviously, if I lock someone up, even if the immigration status, whatever it was, they go to trial, they go to court, and if they get convicted afterwards, then you will get deported. That's how that works. But to just say, okay, ICE detainer warrants, we don't honor it, you're violating a federal law. Let's be honest. And that's the problem. And a lot of these people happen to be gang members, like you said. So you're actually violating a federal law, and I think Eric Adams has been feckless. And this move is correct. You defund these cities where you don't give them the funds, and now you're going to go to court, and we're going to see who's following the law, as Eric Adams says, and who's not, because Eric will be testifying.
Yeah, well, there's no doubt about it, Sal. You hit the nail on the head. When this whole thing comes full circle and the rubber meets the road, that Eric Adams is violating the law. The person that says to follow the law, he says that he told his administration to follow the law, is not following the law himself. And he's putting New York City and New York State at odds with our federal government. And it's just completely irresponsible, because we do have a major problem in this country, and we can't speak light of it. This gang trend de Aragua, if it's not addressed now as it is, and we see immediate action, this could be a problem that we feel for decades. Because these are not stupid people. That's what they don't understand. They're actually some intelligent people that are part of this gang and trend de Aragua, but they have some stupid people. And it's like you like to say low information people. They have low information people in their gang that are following orders and carrying out the crimes. But the bigwigs in this gang that have the money and the funding calling the shots, they're not the ones in the streets. So we have to deport people also that are part of these gangs. Why? So that we garner intelligence and information so that we can actually get the people responsible that actually lead the charge. So you and I both know that when it comes to policing, information-based intelligence is really what helps solve crimes. When you would make arrest, right, and I would make arrest out in the street, what's the ultimate goal? Is to debrief that prisoner to gather intelligence and information that could be successful in a potential another arrest, something unrelated to solve another crime, which is why we make arrests. Arrests lead to information. That information leads to other arrests. And ultimately, that's the key to public safety. So we're lacking the communication between the NYPD and ICE. That's a major problem. That's a barrier that's now been created. Instead of opening doors for the NYPD and ICE, we've now built walls and we're closing off that information and communication. That to me is completely irresponsible, and that allows way too much politics that have interjected and infected public safety. That's the bottom line, right? We're allowing politics to interject and affect public safety. We're using political ideology instead of common sense. Common sense would say, let's have the NYPD at the local level, who has the information of what's going on in the streets, to coordinate and communicate with ICE, right? Again, I don't want them just dragging people off the street. And that's a lie. They try to want to put that information out to the public that Trump, under the Trump administration, that we have basically like stormtroopers going through the streets, picking people off the streets. That's not the case at all. That's not the case. We're looking for people that are just completely vital to the public safety of this nation, especially in New York City. Especially, where are these most illegals going to head to that are looking to commit crime? New York City. Where are you going to make the money? New York City. So there's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, and like I said, there's a lot of politics at play here, and I always say you never play politics with public safety. When it comes to this, there's a lot of misinformation. It works on low information people and voters. It definitely does. They actually believe that there's stormtroopers out there, rounding illegal immigrants up, and we don't even know who's an illegal immigrant. So that's not what's happening. What's happening is the violent migrant gangs that have infected this country and spread the migrant crime wave that you've seen are now being caught and rounded up. And instead of going to court or to trial, a lot of these people have ICE detainer warrants. They've been wanted. They've already been convicted of things. And that's where the problem lies. Those people need to be picked off and brought back to their country. New York City makes you believe the way they speak there, especially politicians. Oh, they're rounding people up. The Trump administration, they're going to come to your door. We're going to knock like it's like Nazi Germany or something. That's completely false. And that's where you have to go from being low information to being informed. That's what they're really banking on, because they have a Democrat Party here that, like, I don't know what to say. Their values, integrity, much of it is in the toilet. Not all the voters, but some of them are low information. So that is the problem with that. So I wanted to segue into the next topic, which is a post by our good friend Reza Chowdhury. Reza Chowdhury says here, who should be investigated for this? And we have a chart here. It says New York City Department of Homeless Services budget by fiscal year. Now, look at how much is being there. He's seeing 200 million, that was the low on this chart. And you see that Giuliani, it was high, then it steadied, and it rose with Bloomberg, and the chart starts to go really skyrocketing under de Blasio. And now $4 billion by Eric Adams. It's gone from, he took over at 6 or 8 billion to $4 billion a year. Department of Homeless Service budget for the fiscal year. Eric, what are your thoughts on seeing something like that?
Well, so much for right to shelter. Excuse me. So much for right to shelter, right? We talk about it all the time. So much for helping out the veterans, and so much for actually helping out the homeless. Where's this money going? We all know the money is going to these migrant shelters, which are hotels, right? Which is private contracts connected to it. So the question is who's on the receiving end of these private contracts? Where is this $4 billion actually going? How is it getting funneled through these hotels to shelter illegal military-age males, to shelter migrants? And where is that money going out? Where is the back end of that money? Follow the money. That's what we have to start doing. Follow the money. Where is that going? Who's on the receiving end? And I'm sure somehow Eric Adams is on the receiving end of that. There's no doubt about it. Look at that chart. That chart speaks for itself. Shout out to Reza Chowdhury, by the way, and also Sam Antar. Both of them on X do a phenomenal job of utilizing New York City's own numbers, whether it's NYPD or whether it's homeless budget or it's Department of Education. They utilize the numbers by the New York City administration. They use their own numbers to debunk the misinformation that they put out to the public. That, to me, is completely irresponsible. I don't even know what the percentage increase of that is. I got to figure that out. But 6 to 8 million to 4 billion, that's astronomical.
It started at 200 million in 1995 under Rudy Giuliani, and today it's 4 billion. I'm sorry, I think it was 6 billion under Mayor Eric Adams. And the budget blew up in almost, 3.5 years, $4 billion for it. Mind you, the transit scam that's going on where they're locking up homeless people in the transit system for number, quota, reasons so that they show that they've locked all of them up. Meanwhile, these people are being arrested for, laying out on 2 seats or whatever it is. Now, some of them might be crazy. Some of them might be criminals. But the people that we're seeing that are leaving the transit district, which are, well, I'll give you 2 right off the bat. Transit District 20 and Transit District 32. Those are homeless people that you'll see there all the time. They have problems, and their problems are being compounded by being arrested. And guess what? They're all declined prosecutions. Am I not right, Eric? I mean, you read the same thing. I put that out. You have the same information as me. What do you think about that? That's their answer to homeless people. Let's arrest them.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind, right? That's been the tactic. And I get the information from anonymous sources on a daily basis from cops, credible sources. Obviously, I'm not going to put out their names, and neither was you, Sal. But they're saying the same thing. The directive from the police department has been to make mass arrests in transit. And they're arresting these homeless people. So they're not providing them aid. I don't think we should be arresting these homeless people. I have no issue with involuntarily removing homeless people that might be a threat to others and a threat to themselves. But most of those people need mental health options. And it's interesting coming from the Eric Adams administration where we heard we shouldn't be arresting ourselves out of every situation. We had vending machines for narcotics. We're supposed to have social services for mentally ill. But now we're making arrests. Now we're making arrests because we need to make sure to keep these numbers at bay because we need the perception management, as Marlon Bethel says. We need to control the perception. We need to sell this idea that people are safe rather than them actually being safe. And to me, it's a backhanded situation for the NYPD because now they're creating what's called the Q teams to have quality life, intrusive police work. But at the same time, there's a memorandum that came out from the police commissioner, Jessica Tisch, to all the chiefs and the different bureaus of the NYPD to disseminate to their people that body camera footage will be viewed on every tour for police officers that are engaged in a stop and frisk, stop, question, and possibly frisk street legal encounter. And if those encounters are not properly done and the body camera is not put on immediately as they're conducting these operations, that the supervisors will be held responsible to impose discipline. So with no support from the unions and an overzealous civilian complaint review board and potential civil litigation, we're sending up police officers to do intrusive police work, but at the same token, if they don't do it properly, they're going to get immediate discipline. And these are police officers that don't have the training to do intrusive police work. Because Sal, you're off the job. I'm off the job. John's off the job. Marlon's off the job. Many others that have, that were trained under intrusive and broken windows policing, they're gone. Who's teaching these guys how to do this type of police work? So you know what? It's completely reckless and it's irresponsible.
And it's also going to cost the city millions of dollars in litigation, which is another issue. And you're going to cost young officers or officers that have a couple of years on the job. They're going to have their records exposed in 50A. People are going to run up to them. And here's another thing. I mean, I know you're not a proponent of 50A. I am. I just don't think it's right that you're right. I don't think a civilian should be able to go up with their cell phone in an officer's face and start saying, you have all these, dismissals and you had a discipline case in 1999, that kind of stuff. You should go to jail for. You shouldn't be in anyone's face with the cell phone. But in New York City, they're allowed to do that. Now, in retrospect, though, now, if you look at how we do things in South Florida, you do that very instant you do that same incident to a cop here in South Florida, you will be on the pavement and you'll be arrested because it's against the law to do that. There should be legislation saying you cannot run up to somebody's face with a cell phone and start screaming about their 58. That is not what I'm for. What I'm saying is that 58 reveals a lot of stuff that the NYPD, who is probably behind Eric Adams, the least transparent organization in all of New York City, they don't want to reveal officers' records. Why? Because it could be used in litigation. It could be used against the New York City Police Department because they have people through cronyism and nepotism that they let get away with things like this Brian Mahone character. There's somebody up top that's protecting this guy. I don't know who. We may find out. I don't know. I know that his cases are being handled differently, the way it was handled by Police Commissioner Sewell and then Caban. And now you're seeing, well, now he's in trouble again. He's been in trouble like virtually his whole career almost. So why is it that the 58, which I'm a believer in it, but I just don't think you should run up on an officer and do that. So I don't know what your feelings are on that, but that in this instance could also be used in the transit system because I know there's a bunch of psychopaths in there, but I think knowing who you're dealing with shows not only sometimes the integrity of the officer. I understand people like you did have you have a long history because people sued you, all this crazy stuff. And that's why I say not every officer is bad because that's not the fact. That doesn't determine an officer, but you will see that the problem childs have a history, and it's a history of they never correct it. And it seems as if someone up top is the one preventing any kind of discipline or holding this person or termination, which is merited in many of these cases. It never happened. So again, it's the 58 is technically a reflection of the leadership of the police department. What do you think?
I'm glad you reminded. I don't want to go too far off. I don't know how many topics you have left, but I'd just like to speak on my take on the 58. And I'm actually not against the 58. I'm against how it's utilized and how it's been weaponized. And it doesn't allow a police officer any room for growth. It becomes a stain. It's almost like dye that you can't get off you. Once you get that stain, the stain can't be removed. And I think that's complete hypocrisy, especially in New York State, when we talk about the comparison to clean slate. So you can actually be a felon. You could commit an armed robbery and you could serve 8 years in jail and you could have a second chance at life. But if you're a New York City police officer or a New York City lieutenant and your name is Eric Dym and you have administrative infractions against you substantiated by the Civilian Complaint Review Board that were actually not played out in administrative trial in the police department, not given due process and actually have the police commissioner actually impose discipline or not, then what we're not leaving room for is context. So that's the problem I have is that the 58 leaves out room for context. Does explain in my particular case that my complainants were actually the most violent perpetrators that made complaints. Every complaint I have is someone that was under arrest. Now, I will own it and say that that is the byproduct of good police work, working in the South Bronx and other parts of New York City, getting illegal firearms and doing intrusive police work. However, if you look at my complaints, it's all at one time. It's completely strategic and attacked by the overzealous Civilian Complaint Review Board, as I was also a racial pawn of the NYPD and I was left abandoned and I was not supported. But with that being said, when it comes to the 58, I do think it's important to have transparency. The public should see these things, but there should be context. And to me, it should not be there forever. There should be a time period allotted, and eventually, even if a complaint is substantiated, maybe after 3 years or after 5 years, it should come off your record. Because you are not the same person. We evolve, and hopefully evolve, right? That is the ultimate goal, is as your career goes on, you become a better police officer. And when you're off the job, why is it still there? One day when I'm 75 years old, am I still going to be the most complained cop? Is my 58 still going to be accessible? And the answer is why? Why? What is it necessary for at that point? What good does it do? So yes, while you serve with the police department, it's good for transparency, but unfounded cases, exonerated cases should be immediately removed. Cases that are substantiated should come off after a certain amount of time. Police officers should be allowed a second chance. These are administrative infractions. If you worked for a company, or even if you worked at Home Depot or some company and you had an infraction and you're 75 years old, someone's not going to look up and that there's still some infraction you made at Home Depot. And you can say policing's different because you're working for public safety and you have the ability and responsibility to take someone's life. But at the end, it's still a career and you should be given an opportunity for a second chance. So I think it's also utilized by these anti-police advocates to put pressure on police officers, to shame them, embarrass them, humiliate them, and it's going to lead to potential corruption, especially with this facial recognition, to go to police officers' homes and to put pressure on them, to threaten their families, to corrupt police officers. And that's my take on the 50A.
I definitely, I can understand your points. I would point to it that without 50A, we wouldn't have learned that the Deputy Commissioner of Operations, Kaz Daughtry, knock, knock, where has he been? He hasn't been seen at One Police Plaza, and he hasn't been posting on social media, which was his big thing, if you remember. Missing in action since the weekend, last weekend. I don't know if he's on vacation, but we wouldn't know his history of what happened had it not been for 50A, and the police department would have definitely blocked anyone from trying to see his records. So it works in that this guy, see, there's always a flip to it. They abused it against you, Eric, but in the Kaz Daughtry case, some of his stuff will show that he should have been terminated a long time ago. But he was an executive. He's an executive now, somehow, currently. Yet he should have been terminated, and the case that he has where he gave misleading statements to the Civilian Complaint Review Board took the penalty, and they agreed. The police commissioner said, we're going to divert from this disciplinary matrix. He gets to keep his job. What we also exposed on the Sal Greco show in the last episode on the 50A, there was an inspector that had this incident with Brian Mahone, where Brian Mahone received 40-day vacation and 1 year dismissal probation. While during this dismissal probation, he was online attacking you and John McCarry, which he should have been terminated for, which is another issue. But there was an inspector who received 40 or 30-year vacation days and a 1 year probation, which he pled guilty to with Brian Mahone of misconduct and misleading statements. That is they're deviating from the disciplinary matrix, and why? There is no explanation. And that's why we need a 50A, because now there are comparator cases for the numerous officers who are not part of the ring of cronyism and nepotism, are not patrons of Sofrito, where anything and everything was going on there every single night, and whoever showed up there never got in trouble. And the poor cop who just comes to do their job, and someone just has a bone to pick with him and just happens to be one rank above them and abuses their authority, they are getting squashed. They have no recourse other than to go on 50A and pull up a Kaz Daughtry and go, you said I gave misleading statements and you firing me, but you didn't terminate him. So why did you deviate? And this is something that Keyshawn Sewell will be atoning for in her future deposition in my own case. Remember, she's the one that said Kaz Daughtry shouldn't be terminated. Yet, how? You gave a misleading statement. So why did you deviate from the disciplinary matrix? You said I gave a misleading statement because I wouldn't say the truth. I was never Rogers security, but you kept saying I was as far as the police department. He is the security with no facts. So that is a problem. And this is why I like the 50A, because it shows the NYPD. The problem is the upper echelon. Who's in charge? The leadership. And it shows and reflects back on them, because we'll see that certain officers, they get away with things. See, Eric, if you would have continued your career, they would have destroyed you. You were going to get terminated. You would have been terminated versus Kaz Daughtry, because you didn't give any misleading statements, but he did. So why is he continuing on in his career? And he got promoted, so he's actually being rewarded for being basically a perjurer, a liar, and a guy who should have never had a career in the NYPD. So that's what I want to point out with the 50, and I thought nothing better than to discuss it with a guy who has been, much maligned over doing his job. And your 50A will, to this day, it's still up there. Anyone can check it out. But I want people to check out the context of things, because Eric's 50A versus the 50A of Kaz Daughtry. Kaz Daughtry, remember, skipped 7 ranks. He's in charge, and his behavior has continued. The same pattern of behavior has continued, and it's cost the New York City taxpayer money in litigation, versus Eric, which was all combined into one thing in one moment where it was all because of the riots. I mean, what do you think, Eric?
Do I have time to respond? I love to respond to that.
Yeah.
I'm not in opposition. I think you bring up some great valid points. I think the 50A is necessary for transparency, and it was transparent in what's going on with Kaz Daughtry. But Kaz Daughtry, to me, is a complete different element. With him, it's about nepotism, and we talk about the fruits of nepotism when it comes to disciplinary matrix, right? Because those that have the connections to nepotism that are part of that top tier, that tier one of the NYPD, get the mitigating factors on that disciplinary matrix. And if you're part of general population, just like myself, you get the aggravating factors. So yes, you're right. I think the 50A is transparent. I have no problem with my information being on 50A, even though it lacks context. I own them. I can explain every case and actually articulate how is good police work. And actually, the NYPD could pull up the award that actually coincides with those civilian cases. But what I can tell you is this: if you're found guilty, at some point they should come off your record. If we're saying that this person has a substantiated complaint, but they're capable to carry a firearm and work for another 5 years in the police department and make arrests and do police work, why is that still on their record? We're saying they're good enough to do police work, but we have a stain that's on their record. How can they grow? How can we expect them to develop and to get better? Isn't that the whole point of discipline and CCRBs, so that someone is disciplined to make them better? How can they get better if that stain is there forever? That's my argument with it. I'm not against it. I believe in transparency. I believe in honesty. I say it all the time. You're a police officer. You have an extreme amount of responsibility, accountability. You have an extreme amount of power that most people don't have. You could work in a precinct, walk across the street, get a cup of coffee, and God forbid you're involved in a gun battle to save someone's life. So yes, we have to be accountable and responsible and to be able to explain that. But we should be treated fair and get due process just as everyone else.
And like if anyone is to judge someone, because a lot of people have done that to Eric, and this goes for a lot. This goes in the country. We're not just going to say New York City. This goes for anyone, any officer, anywhere. You could be Los Angeles, Chicago, Miami, Austin, Texas, wherever it is that you are. This happens every day in a police department. But again, it's the same structure, what I'm saying. Because the argument it always reflects on who's in charge up top. And many people that have ties back to these people, whether it be a crony or nepotism, they will get away with stuff that you go, no way. But they do get away with it. And they have gotten away with it. And that's cost the taxpayers millions of dollars on top of it. Versus minor infractions or frame jobs. And they'll do that too, the frame job. But I want to point out, this has been such a good tool. And I think it's overlooked. And it's that now I think this has been going on for many decades. But because now through social media, and then some of social media, some of these guys have to blame themselves because they just can't stop being self-impressed, taking pictures and videos and telling you what they're doing, whether they're on duty, off duty, things that we never saw before. So it's with the invention of social media, with the way this has gone, and now the transparency that now the records are being shown. If you have nothing to hide, you show your record. Be transparent. And my argument always has been that the New York City Police Department is not transparent. That's what it boils down to. So I want to show you another topic before we go, even though we've blown past the hour, and it's always riveting with Eric on because there's so much to talk about in so little time. But all of this stuff makes sense. We're just trying to make sense with everything. Here's a post again from our friend Sam Antar on X. And you can follow him at whitecollarfraud.com. I suggest you do. Given the recent news that Politico received $81.1 million from USAID, it's worth noting that the December post about Politico receiving $200K annually from New York City has aged quite well. And we could go back because he actually said this to the comptroller. So let me click on this. Dear New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, I am conducting a constituent audit of New York City finances and have noticed the payments to Politico are spread over 7 different expense categories, often for the same purpose. This practice appears to violate the consistency principle, a fundamental rule of accounting. It suggests an internal control deficiency within your office that requires investigation and resolution. I can provide additional examples if needed. Warmest regards, Sam Antar. P.S. In addition, why is New York City spending over $200K a year on Politico, an advocacy group pretending to be a media organization? And you could see right there on the books, and it says it right there on the top, $225,000 for books, and I mean, he listen, he spells it out right here, and you can see it says Politico, pro service, subscription. I mean, this is insane. They're wasting money on this. I mean, Jesus Christ. So what are your thoughts on seeing that? Because it's been bigger than news between the USAID. What's going on?
I think, again, it's so impressive, and I think people should follow Sam Antar. Right? Sam Antar was actually utilized by the feds because he was so intelligent on doing audits. And that's what's impressive. Sam Antar is not bringing these numbers up that are fictitious. These numbers are the numbers by New York City. This is actual spending. So he actually gives the truth and gives the correct information. There's no gaslighting when it comes to Sam Antar's information. And we see the epic fail by Brand Lander, right? The comptroller, complete misuse of money. At the same token, it's a great indication. I'm so glad that Sam Antar has sounded the horn on the failures of Brad Lander, because we don't want him to have an opportunity to become mayor. Absolutely not. We cannot have a threshold for corruption and have Eric Adams and then move into a complete bumbling idiot that has no idea how to handle money and just totally ripped apart the pension systems in New York City. So again, Sam Antar, shout out. He does a great job with numbers, and he utilizes the own numbers of a particular organization such as the NYPD or, in this case, New York City funding. Sam Antar does a hell of a job and just shows the errors, the mishaps, and it all appears to be intentional. 225,000. That's not a coincidence. Exactly. And it looks strange, right? Where's this stuff going? What are they purchasing here, right? It's not even a media organization. It's an advocacy group. And who are they advocating for, right? What do you think, Sal? I think it's ridiculous. But Sam does a hell of a job.
I'll tell you something. Politico over the years has been very critical and if not defamatory towards President Trump and many in his administration. And it led to many things that occurred in the prior presidency of President Trump in his 4 years, and then the 4 years trying to cover up President Joe Biden and the mess that he created with his administration. And now you're finding out that who's funding all of that? The taxpayer. That is disgraceful. And I don't know what New York City is even thinking about doing there and what's going on. I think, kudos to Sam Antar, who should be touted because a lot of people say this, but he's America's favorite convicted felon. How about that? Because everyone says, oh, well, he's a criminal. You know what? I wish criminals were as smart as him, because these are the kind of guys that should actually be working for the government. Because, yeah, they do their crime, they get caught, and then he turned around and used to work for the federal government. I think he may or may not be doing that as we speak, because the abuse and fraud and waste of money that's going on locally and federally and in the state especially is enormous. We could go on forever, Eric, but I figure,
We sure could.
We got to cut it off at a certain point. So, Eric, where can people find you, and what's next for Eric Dym?
Sal, it's always a pleasure. I love being on the Sal Greco show. You're full of charisma. Find me, Eric Dym Cop, on X, Instagram, and find myself and John McCary, New York's finest retired Unfiltered podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, Apple. Live on X, live on YouTube, Monday through Friday, 8:05 live Eastern Time. And for me, 5:05 on the Pacific Coast right now. What's next? We're building right now. We're building a media channel right now. It's John and myself have our own show. Sal Greco has a show, and we're working on some things, really building up this channel and really giving real police perspective out there. Sal, you do a hell of a job. The way that you put the spin on police work and also your knowledge of politics, I really appreciate it. Thanks for always having me here and giving my perspective. I'm enjoying it, man. I'm enjoying retirement. It's been great. I'm RVing in life, traveling, do jujitsu, get to chat with you, good friend, John McCary, Maul and Bethel, many others. So I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
I do, and I really respect your opinion and your analysis, because on this show and on a Finance Unfiltered, I say this all the time. We do the shows fact-based analysis. We don't just say we're rummaging through our head and say, oh, these are all fact-based analysis. There's documents, court documents, articles, numbers, charts, graphs. None of this we come on here and say, I don't feel. It's not based on feelings. It's based on facts. And we're just giving an opinion, whether, the New York City Police Department head honchos like it or not, apparently. Oh, one last thing before we go, Eric. Super Bowl prediction. Who's going to win, the Chiefs or the Eagles?
I'd have to go with Kansas City on this one. I've been saying it. I knew you weren't going to say it, but I'm going with Kansas City on this one. I've been saying that. It's funny, we were talking to someone the other day. I think it was an interview with Tom Joyce, retired lieutenant commander, and he spoke about, and I thought it was interesting. I've been thinking about Kansas City, but somebody found a Kansas City football at the 9/11 grounds. So quite interesting. But my money's on Kansas City. What about you?
I have to say I'm not a fan of Kansas City.
I knew it.
Therefore, and as much as I'm not a fan of the Eagles, even though I like Philadelphia, I'm going to go with Philly because the hatred for certain people, especially someone on the Kansas City Chiefs, and how they parade around this guy. And also the fact that if you watch their games, I believe that the referees are trying to rig it for them. Therefore, I hope the Eagles win on Sunday. I have no money on the game. I'm one of these guys that bets, but hopefully the Eagles win and end this little NFL created dynasty. This isn't the Cowboys of the 90s or the Steelers of the 80s and 70s. This is kind of fabricated, folks. Watch the games. You'll see that the referee will call something. It has to be done because it's the Chiefs. It appears that way. And what do we always say on this show? The appearance of impropriety usually leads to other things that we've always pointed out. It doesn't matter where it is in life, politics, law enforcement, even sports. When you see the appearance of impropriety, there's something you're always there. It's always got to be something there. So this has been another edition of Sal Greco Show. Thanks for tuning in. Like I said before, if you can, click the like button, the share button, the subscribe button, notification button on YouTube, on Rumble. Hit the Rumble button, the follow button, the like button. And if you're listening on any major podcast streaming platforms, please like, share, and subscribe. Do the same for the Sal Greco Show channel. So that channel, I got clips that go up on there. And folks, have a good weekend. Have a good Super Bowl weekend. And we'll be right back at you next week with more informative news. Until then, enjoy the next couple of days.